Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. We're going to start off with our meeting, our first meeting on the Advanced Transportation District Board, because I think that's got a briefer agenda, and we can get that out of the way quickly, and then move to the regular VIA agenda. And so with that, let's take a moment and reflect on what we're about to do and for the evening and the challenges that we face in the future, and give some thought to that. Thank you. Now, if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Jeff, do we have any announcements that you want to do at this time? You want to
Not
do
at this time. I'll do them later.
We'll do them in the other meeting. Okay, very good. Okay, that brings us then to the third item on our agenda, which is a consent agenda. You all have had a chance to review that. The chair will entertain a motion on the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second to approve. Are there any questions or anything that'd like to be deleted to present individually? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to item 4 in our agenda, which is a legal briefing. Do we have a legal briefing? No legal briefing tonight. Okay, good. At least not on this agenda. Okay, then with that, we will move then to the adjournment, and we'll adjourn the meeting of the Advanced Transportation District Board and move then to the regular VIA board meeting. And with that, I'll call that meeting to order. We've already gone through the initial ceremonial issues. We turn it over to Mr. Arndt for any announcements.
Sure. I have a series of employee recognitions I'd like to make, and it's nice to have such a large series of recognitions. So I'm just going to ask, as I call your name out, if you would stand up so we could all recognize you. And I'm going to start with Jerry Ann Jones. I saw Jerry Ann earlier. Jerry Ann, way hiding back there. So Jerry Ann, last month we talked about the National Arts Program, and she was not here. I wanted to recognize Jerry Ann Jones as somebody who really takes ownership in a piece of our program, which has to do with outreach and the arts. And so Jerry Ann manages 4 specific programs. One program that's called KIDS, K-I-D-S, Kids Initiating Design Solutions, that's in partnership with Southwest School of Arts and younger school students design shelters, for example, with pipe cleaners. And I will tell you that the last election year we had, about half of them had voting booths in our shelters. So I thought that was pretty interesting that they were that attuned. She also manages the VIA Youth Art Contest, which will celebrate 20 years in 2015. And that's a contest where we provide a theme to students, and they provide posters. This was a safety theme this year, and again, the top prize winner, we have a wrapped bus with that. And this year's top prize winner, I think, was an 8th grader, correct? Yeah, which is unusual. Usually you get more into the high school years, but extremely talented. She manages Poetry on the Move contest, currently accepting poems for 2015. You should have all received a copy of the 5-year commemorative books, what had been done in the previous 5 years. And then the National Arts Program Employee Art Contest and Exhibit, which is currently on display at the West Side Multimodal Transit Center, and we're going to keep it on display until after we're able to have that community event at that center. So I just wanted to recognize Jerry Ann for all she adds and how important that is in our outreach to the community. Thank you, Jerry Ann. Next, Dominic Drayton. Yeah. Dominic, we had 2 people stand at once. It was like, whoa. Okay. I'd like to recognize Dominic. Dominic Drayton has graduated from the National Forum of Black Public Administrators Professional Development Institute. The San Antonio National Forum of Black Public Administrators Professional Development Institute is a leadership program designed to provide professional development opportunities for individuals and prepare them for this is a quote, the rigors of executive positions in the public sector. and rigorous is the right word. The PDI is an 8-month program that provides today's professionals with skills and tools to further excel in the business environment. It's tailored to prepare graduates for admission into mentoring and executive leadership institute programs. There were a total of 16 professionals participating in the program this year, including representatives from the City of San Antonio, CPS Energy, SAWS, and via Metropolitan Transit. And I let everybody know that an alumnus of the program is Lakita Adams. And so, Dominic, thank you very much for your investment in yourself. We really respect continuous learning and congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
All right. This says Shauna C. Russell. Shauna C. Russell, please stand. She takes direction well, right? So I'd like to introduce you to Shauna C. Russell, who is our my interim chief of staff. And she started work just, today's Tuesday, so it would be yesterday, wouldn't it? Yes. Shauna has 24 years experience working with state and local governments in public policy and public engagement, and 12 years federal experience. She's worked with local, statewide, national organizations on public engagement efforts, policy development, legislative strategy, executive communications, and message development. Shauna spent 20 years working in local and state government in Austin. During this time, she served as senior advisor to Texas Secretary of State Hope Andrade. Prior to that assignment, she worked as Hope Andrade's chief of staff during her term as Texas Transportation Commissioner from 2003 to 2008. She's also an alumnus of Texas Transportation Institute, where they grow fine researchers, and her job will be to keep me in order, so all of you can express your condolences now. But I'd like to welcome Shauna.
Welcome.
And then Tremel Brown. Excellent. All right. Good news. Please join me in congratulating Tremel Brown as effective immediately as VIA's new Vice President of Safety and Training. Tremel has been in the industry for more than 25 years and both bus and paratransit operator himself. He was promoted to Instructor in Training and Development Department, Acting Manager, and ultimately Manager of Training and Development. But again, this is another indication of people who invest in themselves and in investing themselves and constantly learning, move themselves forward. He was an inaugural selectee to the Alamo City Chamber of Commerce EPIC Leadership Program, a 9-month leadership initiative that connects existing and emerging leaders with San Antonio's top corporations, engaging them in advanced problem solving, real-world project management issues, management of multi-agency collaborations, and effective leadership skills from a global perspective. He was also selected from a nationwide search to participate in a leadership development program provided by the Eno Center for Transportation Leadership. And we'll talk a little bit more about that program. So please congratulate Tremel. He's got a big task ahead, and he's prepared himself well. Thank you, Tremel. Alva Carrasco. There we are, right up front. So I have two things for Alva, actually. Alva was selected to also participate in the Eno Foundation program, the Transit Executive Seminar, held annually in Washington, D.C. 34 participants are selected from transit agencies from across the country and invited to participate in the intensive week-long course. FTA Acting Administrator Therese McMillan delivered a keynote address to students on graduation day. She painted a positive outlook for transit, discussing demographic trends, mobility needs, and technology improvements that favor transit use. Ms. Carrasco was particularly impressed, saying, "For such a tiny lady, she sure packed a big punch." And actually, I thought you were talking about yourself. So in addition to the Eno Transit Executive Seminar, Alva was named in Who's Who San Antonio, recognized and celebrated women of distinction on October 21st with a reception and book unveiling. The book features women who are leaders in their fields, businesses, corporate positions, and communities. The book highlights and recognizes some of San Antonio's most notable women from all areas of the city, ethnicities, and cultural backgrounds. Among the honorees was VIA's own Alva Carrasco, VP of Transportation. She was interviewed for the publication and featured on the front cover. The book also recognized notable leaders such as former Mayor Lila Cockrell, current Mayor Ivy Taylor, and Bexar County Sheriff Susan Pomerleau. Ms. Carrasco was introduced at the event and presented a plaque that reads, "Women who run this town," for her achievements. And so for both of those remarkable achievements, Alva, we congratulate you. And because you are such a strong leader, I'm going to ask you to recognize some of your staff.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity to recognize some of my team members. There's a few, so please bear with me. I thought if I was going to be up here, I'd make it worthwhile. The first group I'd like to provide a commendation to an operator, bus operator Andrew Ortegon. If you could please stand up. Operator Ortegon was recently identified by 2 students of Chairman Briseño's MPA class as having been very friendly and helpful. And of special note, Operator Ortegon observed a man in a wheelchair struggling to negotiate a curb. He secured his bus and helped the man in the wheelchair, who, by the way, was not even a bus rider. So we wanted to commend him for his good Samaritanism. The next incident that I'd like to report is on August 14th, bus dispatcher Catherine Arredondo and bus operator John Gudinas. I'd like to recognize them if they please stand up. On the evening of August 14th, Ms. Arredondo received a call from the San Antonio Police Department. They were looking for 3 missing girls and asked if she could help them out by sending out a bolo, which means be on the lookout. After doing so, Ms. Arredondo received a call from operator John Gudinas, letting her know that he had just seen the girls described from the bolo walking towards Commerce and St. Mary's and boarding a Primo bus. Ms. Arredondo attempted to call the Primo operator to confirm, but she wasn't able to get a hold of him. The operator initially did not answer, so she notified transit police to go check this particular bus. After doing so, a few minutes later, transit police confirmed that indeed it was the 3 missing girls that the police department was looking for. So I'd like to recognize them for their fast action and decisiveness in finding these 3 young girls. Thankfully, these incidents don't happen too often. We have another incident involving bus dispatcher Roy Garza and bus operator Ociel Angel Vasquez. If they please stand up. Dispatcher Roy Garza was dispatching that night and also helped in sending out a bolo, resulting in operator Vasquez calling in the person that was being sought after. At approximately 10:54 hours, or in other words, 8:54, a call from a tipster was received advising he had seen a wanted person that was highlighted on the news the night before. Transit police checked with dispatch and verified the subject was on the bus and had exited at St. Mary's and Commerce. Transit police informed dispatch that the subject may be armed with a handgun and to use extreme caution if they located the subject on one of our buses. At about 11:54 hours, about an hour later, operator Godinez called dispatch to advise that he had seen the subject on his bus and would be standing by till the police removed the subject. A few minutes later, deputies boarded the bus and apprehended the wanted subject. Last but not least, this is an incident that thankfully does not happen very often, but out of a crisis, sometimes we find out what a great team we have. Last week, on October 20th, bus operator Jordan Harge came upon what he saw an assault happening in the middle of the street while he was driving the bus. Operator Lionel Gonzalez was walking back to the VIA facility after being relieved from duty downtown. As he walked down Flores Street, he was attacked by a knife-wielding assailant. Operator Jordan Harge drove up on his bus and noticed the scuffle in the middle of the street. As he approached, he quickly realized that the man was being stabbed. Operator Harge stopped the bus and yelled at the assailant to scare him off. He quickly learned that the victim was a VIA operator. He immediately contacted dispatch to report the incident and to request assistance. Another vehicle stopped, luckily for us, that they were able to assist and help chase the assailant away. Dispatcher Gilbert Alvarez was on duty when we received the call for help and immediately contacted Transit Police and Emergency Services. The first to arrive on the scene was Supervisors Eddie Garcia and Jose Hinojosa. They immediately provided first aid and tried to comfort Mr. Gonzalez as they waited for EMS to arrive. Supervisor Garcia may have been instrumental in buying paramedics precious life-saving time. When not assisting Supervisor Garcia's efforts with Operator Gonzalez, Supervisor Hinojosa's calm composure was instrumental in providing an emotional compass for the operator who witnessed the attack. Meanwhile, a team of supervisors jumped into action, coordinating an action plan to direct traffic, emergency responders, and communications to manage the crisis. The supervisors involved to ensure Operator Gonzalez received the care and assistance needed included lead supervisors Eric Ponce, Scott Johnson, Supervisor Roger Preacher, and dispatcher Gary Carson. And they are all standing up. Moments like these are far and few, but it gives me great pleasure, and I'm very proud of my team. I'd also like to report on Mr. Gonzalez's status. He suffered multiple stab wounds, requiring stitches, a punctured lung, and a broken rib. He was admitted to the hospital and was released a few days later. He is home recovering now, and he's in good spirits. I'm happy to report. Thank you very much for this
Thank you,
opportunity.
Alma. Thanks very much. And I'd really like to emphasize one of the details of that story, which was that the bus operator was responding before he was aware that it was a fellow operator. And so the community needs to know that our operators are eyes and ears out there in many respects. And thank you all, first of all, for responding so quickly and also for taking such great care of one of the VIA family. Thanks so much.
And Jeff, before you go to the next item, let me just say, you know, I think it's important for our community, and I'm glad you brought all these employees to be recognized today, because it's important for our community to know that our employees are out there every day touching the lives of everyday people throughout our community all the time, whether it be in emergency situations like this, or whether it be just in providing transportation and basic services, or whether it be upgrading their own skills and developing their own talents. We have a lot of good public service employees that work at VSN we should all be very proud of. And I think it's good to figure out how to communicate this, whether it be on Facebook or taking advantage of multimedia efforts to achieve that, but get the word out so our citizens will know that we've got workers who not only get the job done, but who care about the community and make that grand participation, that main contribution to the betterment of our citizens. Very, very important.
Thank you very much. It's hard to follow that up, quite honestly. But I did want to ask Priscilla Engel to come forward because we, over the last couple months, won 2 marketing awards. And so we're going to start out, and she's going to show this because it's a shorter spot, right? We won the Southwest Transit Association SWATA Spotlight Award in the category of electronic media for the Semester Pass video. It was announced at their annual marketing conference, created originally in August 2013 to market the Semester Pass primarily to high school and college students. And so we're going to show this relatively short segment now. Then the second award we won was through the American Public Transportation Association. Every year they run an Ad Wheels competition among transit authorities. They named these winners at the annual, so the winners were named in Houston. We were honored with the 2014 APTA Ad Wheels Award in the electronic media category for VIA's community video. And this was the video that was produced and shown at the Westside Multimodal Transit Center in February 2014, which was Mary Bresenio's last meeting and right before Alex's first. So in any case, we won that. That was a video that was hosted by a young man who told the story of recent accomplishments and outlined our plans for the future for many initiatives. Now we live in that building, and I just remember at the end of the video when the young man that was in the video stood at the top of the stairs and told us the future arrived. That was a pretty cool time. So congratulations to our marketing people for that as well. Thank you. Just two more quick notes. First of all, just a reminder that the third annual IDEA conference is tomorrow beginning at 8:30 at the Pearl Stable, and it's a great program initiated by Dr. Mendoza to create partnership opportunity between other public agencies and small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, and primes. And so tomorrow will be that conference. It'll be from 8:30 to 1 o'clock, so we'll feed them, right? Breakfast and lunch, I believe, correct. And then last but certainly not least, this Saturday is the VIA Annual Bus Rodeo, which is probably the highlight of my year. I love that we are able to take and have this fun day of competition where our bus operators and mechanics, who every day put the service out on the street, and I think that alone is a heroic effort, but they are allowed in kind of a competitive and fun environment to demonstrate their skills. If you're able to come out for any segment of that, I think you'll really have a good time. There will be a celebrity rodeo beginning at 11:30, and there are a few celebrities seated right here tonight, I think, that are signed up to drive. And so that alone is worth the price of admission, which, by the way, is free. So please join us. And that is my report.
Thank you. All I can say is be careful, because they're going to put me behind the wheel of a bus. So. And I've never done that before, so I need some help, guys. I think we got practice, right? We have a practice opportunity?
You do.
And so hopefully everybody will be safe. Okay, thank you, Jeff, for that report. That brings us then to our next item on the agenda, which is our Citizens to be Heard section. And with that, turn it over to our announcements for our staff.
Mr. Chairman, we have 5 citizens to be heard tonight, and the first citizen is Randy Bear.
Good evening. I had to come tonight because the first thing I wanted to do is wanted to see Tex with his mohawk here tonight, and good to see that. Good to see this. It's looking pretty good and sharp up there. Anyway, hi, Randy Bear here. Actually, I've just wanted to address an item that I've already kind of blogged about, and actually suggested to VIA. VIA has actually had a conversation with me. Both Jeff and Keith have had the conversation about this. And that is, I've started riding the bus now. I'm now working downtown, working at the Weston Center at Geekdom with a startup, and riding the bus from the Crossroads Park and Ride down to downtown using the express bus. I noticed something that was missing, and that was really, I noticed a lot of bus riders were having the same problem, and that was that the Park and Ride was missing a display board, a arrival display board. And that's something that's really critical. If you're riding the bus, knowing when these buses are going to be arriving, knowing if you've watch how to schedule and how to deal with it, especially if you're using that as kind of a interim exchange point in your travels. Those arrival display boards are really critical. You have them at the Medical Center Transit Center, and so it's really important, I think, to have them at the other transit centers. So that was the recommendation I wanted to make. That I don't know how much the cost is. I mean, I went in and did a little Googling and checked out the price, and I'm sure Jeff and Keith can also come up with some. You already have some of these out there at other locations. So that's my recommendation is that you look at investing in putting arrival display boards. In fact, I think Keith has even talked about looking at the Portland. Portland has some very good display boards out there themselves that they use. They use flat screen TVs and enclosures that actually give you a lot more opportunity. So that's my recommendation to the VIA board. Thanks.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Patrick DeOr.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Dior, and I am representing the downtown restaurant Bella on the River. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to address the board again. On behalf of Bella, the Paseo del Rio Association, and all Riverwalk and downtown restaurants, I want to thank Diane Mendoza and her department for championing the Entertainment, Arts, and Culture Shuttle Initiative, item 9 on tonight's agenda. This initiative is so important to San Antonio's downtown restaurants, all patrons of the arts, and the downtown restaurant guests. I'm here tonight to show our support and to renew our commitment to promote this shuttle in any way possible. We're truly grateful for your time and your consideration on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Ferris Hodge.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Whenever y'all have new board members, y'all need to introduce them so we know who they are, because we don't know who they are. There's one lady sitting next to us. We don't know who she is, and y'all need to do that. Is this thing working?
I think you might hit the button.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. It's not working. Testing. Okay, now, I guess I have to start over again. You need to let us know who the new board members are. We're having a problem with the Primo bus, Mr. Hutt. The Primo buses, in the back of the buses, the signs you don't have a sign saying these buses stop at the railroad track. Y'all could get hit, and then y'all could get sued for not doing that. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Crossroads Park and Ride restrooms are too small. Y'all need to have 2 seats for the disabled, 2 seats for the regular people. Well, you're all regular. I can't say it like that because I might. And then you need to have a urinal, for the men, because the one seat is for the disabled and the regular people. When you're in a wheelchair, you need to go to the restroom right quick. You can't do it. Y'all need to get with Crossroads Park and Ride, the people that own Crossroads, and see can they sell via 10 acres more. The Primo buses, y'all need to use them like we're having the Spurs game tonight. Y'all usually need to use the Primo bus. You can get 60 people at one time. July the 4th, 2014, I had told y'all about how y'all security drew everybody out of the park and ride, and y'all just move it over like it's going to disappear. It's not going to disappear. That was wrong for that guy to throw everybody out of the park and ride. We are senior citizens. There was babies, newborn babies, and young kids. Everybody got threw out of the park and ride. I got cussed at, and I told y'all that, and y'all did not do a dime about it. Just move it over. Well, something like this, that, and the other, okay? But it's not going to go away. I'm going to talk about it until y'all address that. Somebody wrote a letter and talking about, well, we give you 2 hours. 2 hours for what? Well, after 2 hours, you're lottery. Y'all, I think these people that working for you, Mr. Bazinga, I think they lost their mind. The police department give you 4 or 5 hours. And they cannot go up to you and move you away from that bus stop if you're not fighting or cussing or stuff. So something's wrong with y'all's department. VIA should not advertise on the windows, cover the windows up, we can't see at night. I talked to Miss Scully, Mr. Pazino. The downtown sidewalks are still filthy, smell like a sewer. And they want to just wash down in front of the bus stop. The whole block, 24 blocks need to be washed down every other night, if not every night. And if y'all want your ridership to increase, y'all gonna have to do something about that. When y'all send us a letter, y'all don't write down nothing we talk about. Just write down what you want to talk about or what you want to hear.
Damon Mason.
And VIA had a transcript when we had the VIA meetings. I didn't get a copy, and I asked for a transcript. So VIA, y'all do what y'all want to do. But don't forget one thing. It is going to be on my TV show how y'all mistreat us.
Damon Mason.
Chairman Senior, President Art, many salutations. What I've just handed, President Art and Chairman Brasino is an essay I wrote, detailing my perspective of what needs to happen with, Texas Loop 13 in relation to the Southwest Connection Corridor Research Initiative. So anyway, I will, lead you through part of that. Simply put, I was at the Texas Transportation Department district office with that essay for Texas Loop 13 to be reconfigured so that it has a double concrete contraflow lane for transit loops right down the center of the roadway, complete with pedestrian access. In order to ensure safety, my plan calls for left turns and U-turns to only be permitted at highway junctions and signalized intersections where two or more VIA service routes intersect or converge/diverge. Signalized side streets that do not have a VIA service route on them are afforded left turn as a means of egress to Loop 13, but not access from Loop 13, while non-signalized side streets and business driveways have a mandatory right turn as sole means of egress and access along with the drive maneuver known as the Michigan left turn. Now, of course there are some blind spots with that, and one of the really big ones is that there's no definitive way to determine where all the bus stops along Texas Loop 13 are, so that that data can be incorporated into the construction of that transit contraflow lane. So if I could get some assistance with that, that would be very helpful. I would also like for VIA to consider building a fleet of double deck and double articulated hybrid buses fueled by at least 85% biodiesel fuel year round for use on the clockwise looper and anti-clockwise looper service routes. And I'm wondering how can I build that case for you guys? How can I build that case to get that to happen?
Willie Mae Clay.
Thank you. Good evening. For those of you who were here last month, I think you remember my face. Maybe you remembered my name. But did you remember what I talked about? I spoke to the 30-minute window. And what I said was, in the event that the van doesn't appear 10 minutes prior to the negotiated time and fails to appear 10 minutes after the negotiated time, then without changing the 30-minute window, permit paratransit users to call 10 minutes after the negotiated time as opposed to 20 minutes after the negotiated time. Did you recall that? Well, I'm still hanging with that because I feel that that's fair. That doesn't change the 30-minute window at all, because VIA knows where the vans are at all times. So if you've taken 10 minutes out of our time and the van still doesn't arrive 10 minutes prior to the negotiated time and hasn't arrived 10 minutes after, I think that's fair to allow us to call. Now, I just wanted to review that so it'll stay at the cortex, because I want to get a response. And when the response is given, I want justification why it isn't seriously considered. Now, let me deviate a little bit. I did get in just before the persons in main line were recognized for whatever occurred. I think it's commendable. I am a person who uses both main line and paratransit. But I just want to remind you, paratransit is still there. I didn't see anybody from paratransit recognized today. We are given accolades in the little newsletter that we receive, but let me remind you, separate is not equal. So if you're going to recognize the mainline drivers, find something commendable for paratransit. Because there are a lot of good paratransit drivers out there. We have a complaint line or a comment line, and persons can use that for both paratransit and mainline. But hey, let's see some recognition given to paratransit drivers, okay?
There
I
are no
think
more
that would be
citizens to be
fair.
heard.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. She wasn't here for that. Okay, that concludes the citizens to be heard item. And I do think it's appropriate that staff followed up with a response on this 20-minute window issue. And it was an issue that was raised a month ago. And so if you could work on that, follow up, I would appreciate it. Okay, that brings us then to our consent agenda. We have a relatively short consent agenda today, 3 items. The chair will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Are there any items that y'all would like to pull from the agenda for individual discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to item number 6, and I believe Gary's got that presentation.
Good afternoon. Staff is asking the board to approve award of indefinite quantity contracts to 4 each civil engineering firms for the purpose of civil engineering design and surveying. The 4 firms are Vickery and Associates, Klotz and Associates, Holf Associates, Burry SAN. The term of the contract being recommended is 3 years with 3 additional option years. The dollar limit per firm is $750,000 through the duration of the contract, and that would include any option years if exercised. The total contract cost would be capped at $3 million. Now, we use these civil engineering design services for numerous projects. Some examples are the shelter program, facility upgrades, and general construction. The 4 recommended firms were selected from a pool of 14 proposals by a technical committee of staff members using criteria of experience, capacity, and project approach. The work will be issued by task order. The funding will vary according to the task order based on the type of work, and the funding could range from grants to operational funds. The business diversity goals will also vary according to task order and the type of work that's being requested. So again, staff is recommending the award of indefinite quantity contracts for engineering services to Vickery and Associates, Klotz and Associates, Holf Associates, Burry SAN at a total contract cost not to exceed $3 million. And I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on this item? We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Yes, Lester.
Yeah, I have one question. And excuse me if we already went over this before. I'm reading this. It says that VIA will establish the DBE and SBE participation goals
Yes, sir. Per
And-
task order.
per task order. So do we have an idea what that range would be, or how is that determined?
It would be based on the diversity program that we have and the type of work that we're requesting. And then it would also vary according to the funding source. If it's federal funds, certain guidelines kick in. If it's local funds that are being used for the project, it's a slightly different program.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I believe in each of their proposals, they submitted a list of DBE
Yes, sir.
firms that they would be drawing from. Yeah. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is also Gary's, and that's in our CNG fueling station.
Yes, sir. Staff is asking the board to approve award of a $1.278 million contract to Trillium CNG for the delivery and installation of a compressed natural gas fueling station. Now, this particular fueling station is almost an exact duplicate of what we currently use to fuel our 23 CNG buses. This station will provide backup in case of any issues with our current station. And once we move to the larger CNG program, it will serve as backup to our eventually large compressor station that will go in to fuel the entire fleet. The funding of the skid is being sourced through a Clean Fuels grant that we received from the FTA. That grant will cover 80% of the costs. There is a 20% local match that will be sourced from operating funds. There was a 12% DBE goal for this project. Trillium has committed to using a local certified DBE to achieve a 17% participation level. So again, staff is recommending award to Trillium for the delivery and installation of the CNG fueling station or fueling skid. And I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on this item? We have a motion and a second. Any questions for Gary?
I'm sorry? I believe let's see. I've got the contract terms. I'm going to have to give you the exact terms, but we expect for this skid to be up and running within 6 months.
Can you refresh my memory where it's going to be located?
It's going to be located at the south end of the yard next to our current station. And then with our plans to expand the yard, it'll eventually be moved to allow for more parking, but in the near term, it'll be sourced next to where we currently fuel our CNG buses.
And would you give us a context as we transition to CNG fleet?
Context, we are looking at installing a station that would be 6 times what each of these particular skids is capable of doing. And so I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but last I recall, we're looking at 6 each 600 horsepower compressors that would be mounted in the near vicinity of what was the CDC currently in an employee parking lot. And that station would be able to fuel 500 buses in an 8-hour period, and it would have some redundancy available so that if we had any maintenance or any issues with any particular compressor, we would be able to start up another, and our operation would not be impacted because of that failure or because of maintenance.
And our current transition plan calls for replacing how many buses with CNG buses?
All of our planned purchases over the next 5 years of buses, we are scheduled to be CNG. We are looking at potentially using diesel for our 60-foot buses, and the reason we say that is because we have experienced some power issues with our Primo because it's the exact same engine that is used in our 40-foot buses, and it's the only engine available for the 60-foot bus, so we're still kind of evaluating that right now.
If I recall correctly, we plan to, our current plan is to replace 263 buses, is that right? with CNG?
93, I think.
293?
It's nearly 300.
Nearly 300. The important message I'm trying to communicate to the public
It's a lot of buses.
is that this is a big transition plan that's going to deal with air quality in our community.
Correct.
It's a major investment of almost 300 buses, and this is a fueling station investment that facilitates that. And the overall goal there is to convert for cost savings in terms of fuel, number one, and number two, the air quality improvements as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Where is the headquarters of Concor Inc.? DBE member?
Trillium, I believe, is based in,
Well,
let's see if I can find it here.
is Concor here?
No, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, Concord, yes. Yes, Concord is a locally based firm.
Okay, I just wanted to
The
confirm that.
DBE piece.
Do we have representatives from Trillium and Concor here today?
I don't believe so.
Oh.
No, sir.
Okay. I always like to, see them for one thing, but secondly, to express the interest in the contract, but also to see the local companies especially that are participating in our work, and to recognize and to thank them for their engagement with VIA.
Thank you for that feedback. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We haven't voted on this yet, right?
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us then to our next item, which is for information only and discussion and possible action, and that's on our January service improvements. And Elva is making that presentation?
Tracy Manning.
Oh, Tracy, okay.
This is the January service revisions that were proposed for the capital public hearing, and we received very positive.
Microphone. Microphone.
Now can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can.
I'll get closer. Okay. These are the same, the same service improvements that we brought last time. Okay, thanks. And I just wanted to go through them again, but we did go out for public hearing on the 1st and the 6th, and we received very positive comments. And so actually on some, like on the looper, they asked for even more frequency improvements than what we're giving it. But I just wanted to go through, it is frequency improvements, one minor service change. The improvements are to the Blanco route, 20-minute midday service, the St. Mary's route, Nogalitos, Culebra, and 534 Wurzbach. 20-minute peak service to be added to the 5 McCullough, 30 Rigsby, 42 Roosevelt, 88 Bandera, and to the loopers. And then the 609 route to go to a 30-minute frequency, which is now 60. And the 630 route, which is out of Randolph Park and Ride, for the trunk portion to be 30. This is the geographic spread around the city of the routes that we're hitting. And again, this hits 22% of our ridership. And so, again, these are those routes, the two Blanco St. Mary's, 82 and 51. These are a 20-minute base. The 534, the same. And if you remember, there was a small route change off of Lock Hill, Selma, on the 534 to go to the Castle Hills kind of commercial spine on Military Highway. And then 20-minute peak service, the 5 McCullough, 30 Rigsby, 88 Bandera, 42 Roosevelt, and of course the loopers, one of our larger routes. And then 30-minute peak service on the 609 that connects Ingram with mainland. And this is the 630 route out of Randolph Park and Ride, and this yellow portion of the route would be served with 20-minute service, which is 30-minute service right now. And each of those branches would have 3 separate branches on that route. If you have any questions, I'd like to answer them.
Thank you for that presentation. Now, before we go to the questions, is this part of the improvements that were approved as part of our budget process?
Yes, in fact,
Yes.
we have
And do they have to be approved individually, separately? Is that what we're doing here?
as a package, correct?
Okay, so we have to have a motion on
Same
this.
package, yes.
So do we have a motion on this item? We have a motion, is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Okay, Richard, you had a question?
Yes, this frequency is often related to increase in ridership as well. Do you anticipate an increase in ridership from these routes?
Yes, and that's what we were looking for with these improvements. We looked at the
Right,
routes where we had higher ridership with the lower frequency, so if we would get that bump, if we increase the frequency to get
Do you have
additional
targets
riders.
on each of these or collectively? Do you have targets for increase for each of these or collectively? How much do you anticipate of an increase in ridership?
We were just using our productivity for the amount of hours. We're trying to stay with our average productivity, so I don't know exactly what that total is, but it's, at the 28 passengers per hour.
Okay, It might be, it might be good to calculate that in the future and,
Okay.
and so that, because a number of us are concerned with the ridership levels and increasing those significantly at the present time.
It seems we finally turned the corner. We have increased in this month, so,
Right.
where we're kind of flattened out there for a while.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
The difference between every 30 minutes and every 20 minutes may not just be the percentage difference between 30 and 20. If people find that when they go to the bus stop, they don't have to wait as long, they're more likely to go to the bus stop. So there may be, there should be a number that justifies whatever that, going from 30 to 20, or is 15 better, or is 25 better? What is the point where the economy of how often the bus is to the increase in ridership? Is there any kind of science involved in this?
Yes, we usually get a bump, and so just our historical information when we do this, but it does, for that to totally mature, when you get the bump in the frequency, the ridership, it can take as long as 2 years to get, all of the increase that you would expect. But typically, right away, you start seeing, it becomes more attractive. I mean, now you have, the extra trips that are coming in between. You don't, like you said, you don't have to look at a schedule sometimes. You're able to just walk out and get on. And so,
I'm curious too, the number 5 that actually connects the airport to downtown. I know many of the airport workers and many of those people that are taking actual planes out of San Antonio do connect on the number 5 route. So a month after it goes live, I would like to see the numbers for that particular one.
sure, we can certainly bring back what the numbers are, what they were, and what the increase is. Probably like, a quarter, to get a quarter's worth of information would be more useful. So
That'll be good.
I have a question regarding, can you hear me?
Yes.
There you go. It seems to me a chicken and egg question when we're dealing with this addressing ridership. We're trying to respond to what we think is an underserved ridership by increasing the frequency. Is that what we're doing in these changes?
It's where we were having crowded buses, and so we wanted to,
Yeah.
we wanted to make sure that we put out, we're first able to handle the capacity that was needed.
Right.
And then where we had that increase, we wanted to get additional riders in those areas.
One of the things that I think you also said, though, was that, or maybe David alluded to it, is this issue of, creating opportunities for folks to get into the system because they can rely on it coming more frequently, and so that it's more practical. I sense that this is one of those sort of, I don't know, so I'm curious about the data, but I'm wondering if our system has the challenge of trying to increase frequency, because again, we always are trying to stretch our resources to meet the needs that we have, but we don't. I wonder whether we are creating more transportation opportunities on our routes to have shorter wait times, so that our community can say, yeah, this is not an ordeal to sit out, for an hour or 30 minutes or what have you. In their minds, maybe an unreasonable amount of time. In my mind, too, frankly. So I wonder, what is the overall state of our system in regards to that issue?
First, I'll take Mr. Martin's question about the criteria that we look at with respect to adding service. These routes are the routes that have the highest productivity in our system. And so if you look at all of our 30-minute routes, and you take the ones with the highest productivity, 28, 29, 30, 31 passengers per hour, which from an industry-wide perspective is very high. I mean, with the exception of like New York or Chicago or something, but for a city of our size, that's very, very heavy ridership. And we're adding one bus. You add one bus to the rotation, that makes a 30-minute bus a 20-minute bus. Same for those that are at 20 minutes. If you add a bus, it makes it a 15-minute service. So these are the highest productivity routes that we're adding service to. And generally speaking, when you add service to those types of routes, you get the best return in terms of a ridership bump. We have put in a 1-for-1 ridership increase for every percentage increase that we are adding in our service hours. So we're adding 3.8% in terms of hours. We're assuming we're going to get a 3.8% increase in ridership. That is a relatively aggressive goal. Usually during the first year, you won't get that kind of elasticity with respect to service frequency. You might get a 60% return. With respect to your question, you know, making routes going from 30 minutes to 20 minutes, especially from 60 minutes to 30 minutes, is an enormous change for people and how they experience the system and how they experience the wait. You know, there's numerous studies out there that show, you know, even a 5-minute wait, a 10-minute wait is an enormous amount of time when you're waiting at a bus stop. And so if we can reduce that, and if we can reduce the time to transfer from one route to another route, you know, this does have a synergistic effect in terms of people now are able to make a connection that they couldn't make before. Now that opens up a whole new series of travel options that they didn't have before, because we went from a 30-minute to a 20-minute, from a 60-minute to a 30-minute. We still have 3 or 4, 5 routes, I think, that are at 60 minutes. It's our goal to make every one of them 30 minutes. That was what was in the long-range plan, and we will do that at some point. It's very expensive relative to the amount of ridership on those routes, because those routes are, generally speaking, circulator routes in the outskirts of our service area. So it's always a balance, but this year, given where we were with ridership, we thought it was particularly important to address those routes which carry the most amount of our passengers. These routes also happen to be the ones, generally speaking, which saw the most significant reductions. As Tracy mentioned, in September, for the first time, we had an increase year over year, a 2.6% increase year over year. So that was very heartening and something that we were sort of looking forward to. I think the winter will see improvements, and then when we come with this is about 3 of the 3.8% increases right here. When we come in January with the increase, I think we'll see a big improvement in the early part of next year, and hopefully that will continue on through the remainder of the year. But it's true, we want to continue to provide these kinds of opportunities for people to improve their experience, and we think this is an important step forward, and I think in the coming years we'll continue to look for opportunities to do that.
And my question is aimed, I'm glad that we're doing this, and I applaud us and you for being able to make this happen. I think this is one of those subtle, it seems to me, indicators of how well we do what we do, or how much we can do with what we have, that I don't want us to lose sight of it. You know, I think there are places, I imagine, that have greater frequency, that creates that synergism that you're talking about, which then becomes this successful transportation system. And if we're, you know, at that difficult juncture of having to go from what we've been to the more modern transportation system, I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that that's one of the ways in which less resources impacts our ability to do that. We do have bus service, and it's great that we can move people, but when you keep people waiting a long time as a system compared to what they may find in other communities, I think that we're at a disadvantage, and we need to somehow own up to that and do what we can to rally the troops in our community to acknowledge that challenge and help us meet it. So, you know, I'm curious about how we do with others. I know there was a positive report that said that we were highly ranked in some way, and I'm thinking, okay, I know that says something, but I'm wondering what it's not saying. So this is a conversation I think we need to start having more of, the idea of truly meeting this community's needs, truly acknowledging where we have a gap in our ability to do so, and then talking collaboratively with the planning that's going on as to how we bridge that gap.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, Tex, go
Do you
ahead.
want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and I just, and thank you for the presentation, Keith. And just want to add to what Doug was saying is that I think it's important that we communicate the message out to the community that we have to balance customer service with providing additional buses, and so we have that cost associated with that. And then the length of time, I believe you said it'll take a couple of years for us to receive a return on investment for, or somewhere, you know, whatever the amount of time is. Right. And so, you know, so that people will truly understand that when we make these decisions, you know, we have to take these factors into consideration. Because I think a lot of times, you know, we would all like, you know, for a bus to pop up as soon as we get to the bus stop. But understand that there's a cost associated with that. And last question is, you mentioned that this is adding one bus per hour, or I didn't catch that part. To these different routes, or is it a couple of buses, or we?
Yeah, that's scheduling. We'll bring you back and do scheduling 101 with you. But basically, you add one bus to a rotation, and it depends on the length of the route, because it takes, you know, the longer the route takes more buses. So generally speaking, when you add a bus, you go on, you know, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, 60 minutes. And so, yeah, all of these, I'm sure, are one bus adds to the rotation. I mean, some routes have 4 buses, some have 6 of them. Now, the Looper, for example, I think we're adding 6, right, in the peak hour, because it's an incredibly long route and a very frequent route, so it takes more resources. That's the thing. So to make the Looper go from a 20-minute to a 15-minute takes 6 buses in the peak hour all day, and then doing that all day long. Whereas making one of these shorter routes going from a half hour to 15 minutes may only take 1 bus. So it's just depends on the situation. But you know, the Looper one, we get complaints every day about crowding, and so I think I'm not minimizing these. I think, or looking at, you know, I mean, these are very, very important improvements that we're making that people will feel every single day. So I think they're great, and appreciate the opportunity to put them in the budget and to increase the budget to do it.
Tex, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, I see that a number of these routes are obviously they're planning for future usage going to the south side, and I'm all for that, and I'm crazy about that. I'm glad that you guys are going that route. But my kind of question here is there a plan for us to do something where it's pushing another loop further out closer to 410 so that we could, you know, I mean, if you're increasing on the 34 and the 42, you look at it, it's basically 410 on the south side is where you're having a lot of extensions here, but there are also routes there that you could very easily, you know, go and connect to, especially with the installation of the city base depot that's going to be there, or park and ride, and just to be able to connect, you know, the 20, the 36, the 34, the 42, 44. I mean, that's all within a very short 5-mile, you know, route on 410. And I know personally 410 is not that busy any day on the south side. So just kind of, my question really is there anything that's in the works that would evolve to do something similar like that?
You mean like across town, coming across the south side?
I mean, it's, if you look at it, I mean, you're talking about our system map. I mean, you have all these, it would be, yeah, kind of across town, but also a way of kind of connecting on the south end from either Brook City Base, or, I mean, even up higher on the east side, you know, something like Copperhead or something like that. But if you look at it, we have these little centers that are right there, like that close to 410. And if we're expanding our lines out there, you know, you know, like I said, it kind of makes sense to have a nice little connecting bus that's going between some of those centers, especially if we're expanding out.
On 410 right now, it's not as developed as on the north side.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so like the looper actually does go on military, but we still maintain that service down there.
Yeah.
And on military, that's one of the things that's being looked at with the Southwest Corridor Plan, is looking at Southwest Military, that, like you said, many of those routes are crossing by there. Now you're tying that in with that service, so they'll make those connections.
Yeah.
Increase the frequency, and you have, as Keith was saying, more trips become available where those connections are now in a shorter time period.
Okay.
During the Southwest corridor study, as those come out, in terms of accessibility on that side of town.
Okay.
But we're, happy to talk to you more about it and learn what ideas you have.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The reason for initiating this sequence of questions was you have down rather effectively and consistently the $3 million annual cost of increase. So if we would have the additional data in the presentation as it's made as to the anticipation of increase in ridership, we can look at cost effectiveness in the expenditure of funds, number one. And number two, it would allow sort of board oversight, board 101 in performing its oversight functions. We would be able to evaluate and to see whether or not we are meeting our expectations and whether or not there is an effectiveness by the presentation itself rather than going through all of this.
Thank you. I think we're about ready to vote. Let me just say a couple things. I think we're focusing today on these changes. We're talking about less than a dozen routes that we're changing. And there are routes that we're changing from 30-minute intervals to 20-minute intervals, from an hour to 30 minutes, et cetera. But we also, all, at the same time, have a lot of routes that have 10-minute, 12-minute intervals. And so it'd be interesting to know what our average time is, waiting time, on all of our routes for our 44 million passengers per year that we carry, because these are the really the kind of the growing routes, but they're relatively marginal. We have some high capacity, high density routes now that have more frequent service, and so I think that would be good to get a feel for that in the future. And the second key point here, I think, is for the public to know, is our budget included 3.8% increase, improvement in service levels. 3% of that is in this package here, but that's without a fare increase. There was a fare increase that was scheduled for this next March, I believe, to go, or January, to go into effect, and that's being postponed for at least a year. And so that's probably because of increasing sales tax revenues coming in ahead of schedule to be able to absorb the costs. But we're able to improve service levels without raising fares and without an increase in that, although that was already programmed. And so again, shows that we are delivering a good service. And so I think that's important to communicate as well. So with that, hearing no further questions, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks.
That brings us then to our next item, which is item number 9, the Entertainment, Arts, and Culture Shuttle Initiative. And with that, I guess we're going to have Tracy and Alva present that as well.
Good evening again. Thank you for having me back. I am here today to share with you an update regarding 2 service initiatives we are currently considering in response to requests we received from downtown stakeholders and also due to the recent opening of the Tobin Center for Performing Arts. As many of you are aware, in the last few years, San Antonio has experienced an arts and culture renaissance of sorts. Staff recently met with downtown stakeholders and the Broadway Reach Arts and Culture Group to discuss potential partnerships that would benefit all stakeholders while boosting ridership for VIA. So I'd like to show you what we're calling the entertainment shuttle. This is a potential route that's being considered, and we don't have a name for it, so it won't be the entertainment shuttle, but for now, that's what we're calling it. Based on the discussions we've had with both of these groups, we're considering 2 shuttle services. This is one of them. As you can see, it is a one-way loop, or an L-shaped, but it does make a loop, and it actually starts from the Tobin Center, comes down St. Mary's southbound, and then travels eastbound on Market to the Convention Center, passing on its way several other venues and restaurants. And then it loops back up to Commerce, going westbound, and northbound on, what is that? Navarro, sorry. What we're considering for the entertainment shuttle throughout a 3-month pilot is to operate it Tuesday through Sunday evenings for specifically Tobin Center and Majestic Theater events to connect with downtown businesses and parking facilities. It would operate from 6 p.m. to midnight or until the event is over or the venue closes. We're proposing 10-minute service or better, and it would serve Central Business District core and venues. We would partner with Centro and other business groups on marketing plans and prepaid fares. Here's another view of the route, and if you look at this map, you can see that there is a lot of entertainment along the segment of the route. The red areas are all entertainment venues. The blue are all parking facilities, all walking distance from proposed stops on the shuttle. And we also have access to the River Walk, which also connects to a lot of other restaurants and hotels in the area. And let's not forget the Convention Center. That's a big deal on the east side there. The other route is what we're calling the arts and culture route, would serve the Broadway Reach area. We're considering operating it 7 days a week to connect art and culture venues with the hotels downtown, businesses, and some of the area schools. It would operate frequent service, but it would be on a branded bus. It would be simple, easy to understand, and would also include high visibility bus stop shelters and real-time information, for instance, to make it easy for anyone to understand how to get to these venues. It would connect the Convention Center business, downtown hotels, area schools with the venues, and partner with Broadway Reach and the CVB groups on a marketing plan. The route has not been finalized, but just to give you an idea of where all these venues are, we're looking at the McNay Art Museum, which you'll see up there on the top of the map, connecting down to Broadway. And if you see the little red area that kind of goes off to the left, the San Antonio Zoo and Brackenridge Park. The Botanical Gardens may also be involved in this potential route. And we're trying to tie it in with Broadway Reach marketing. So we already have a marketing component there that Priscilla's group is looking to see how we can join in and partner up with that. And just to give you some ideas of some of the partnerships and branding, these are just examples of other services that we found, but we would be looking at branding elements to make it a distinctive bus so everybody knows the bus will take them to the zoo or to the museum. There would be things like promotional materials, thank you. Like it would have a distinctive name, a logo, and a bus design. We're also looking at a different bus type. As a matter of fact, we took out a 30-foot bus yesterday around the entertainment shuttle route to get an idea how they maneuver through our downtown streets, and they have a distinctive look so people know when the bus is coming that that's their bus. Other promotional ideas for these routes are special bus stop signage, a brochure, a special brochure with the map of all the venues, digital and print advertising, social media, of course, and posters and ticketing and cross promotions. Next steps is we're still continue our discussions with our business partners, Central and others on marketing campaigns and possible prepaid fare options to implement the pilot entertainment shuttle service for downtown events. We would do a 3-month pilot to see how service does, evaluate the vehicle and the branding options for the pilot and future implementation in case we do a permanent service, and gather the data and develop route options to serve Broadway Reach locations as well. And lastly, we have to meet with the Broadway Group and the Conventions and Visitors Bureau on marketing campaigns and possible prepaid fare options and other partnership opportunities to boost ridership. If approved, today we're just letting you know about the 3-month pilot for the entertainment shuttle. We haven't finalized the museum, the arts and culture shuttle. The entertainment shuttle would cost approximately $200,000 a year if implemented. The 3-month pilot would only run Tuesday through Saturday. So it wouldn't be for the whole year, just through the pilot. After that time of the pilot research, we will evaluate the service, and if eligible for permanent service, then we would have a public hearing and we would come back to the board for approval. Any questions?
Thank you. So for action in terms of today, what we're talking about is a request to approve the pilot program on the entertainment.
Correct.
Circulator
Correct.
shuttle. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and so I assume what you're looking for is also additional direction to move forward with the rest of the analysis as well. And so, do we have a motion on that?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Therefore, now are there any questions?
I have some. First of all, this looks like a great idea for a streetcar. No.
My thoughts exactly.
Because I thought I'm in the alternate world, right? Where. So, was this presented at a committee meeting? Was this presented at a committee meeting?
No, it was
No, it was
not, because we had a committee meeting that did not have a quorum. So-
Okay, so I think obviously who could be against this kind of concept, but it is, I've had this question lingering frankly in my mind about, okay, so what do we do with the larger transportation initiatives we have, and doing this looks like, of course, a noble thing, but I'm also, curious about how this fits into the larger responsibilities we have for providing transportation. This comes at a cost to us. It's not the original concept that I think we were championing. It is serving a good purpose, but that's why I was asking whether we had presented this at a committee meeting, because although I like the idea, the concept, who would not like it? I think it's important for us to be talking in a larger sense about how we go forward from the pause button that was pushed on streetcar, how this fits in that picture going forward. And so I'm not against this, but I think process is important, because then you can build credibility and support, not only within us, but in the larger community.
Right.
These are the kinds of things that would be wonderful to hear in the context of the streetcar concept or some other options that we were considering some time ago. I guess that's what I sort of wanted to just put that out there. Is there a need to be doing this at this time, since we didn't, have a committee discussion about this?
No, we have been working in partnerships with downtown interest on one and with the museum interest on the other. We're not moving forward with the museum interest in any case, and they know that we're continuing to work. So if we went back and said that the board wanted further discussion, clearly that, this is not of that ilk, if you will. But.
And if I may add, part of the initiatives is the partnerships that we're building with the stakeholders, is that we both benefit. So they bring something to the table and we bring something to the table. And I think that's where the success will come of this type of service is that we're both cross-promoting and making sure their customers become our customers and vice versa.
Yeah, if I might, before other questions, just also to respond to your question, I think we had several folks who approached us with the development of the opening of the Tobin Center, approached us about creating some type of connection between some of the activity down on Houston Street, on the Riverwalk, to get people from there to do joint programming with the Tobin Center, provide shuttle service, and also opportunities for entertainment afterwards. And this kind of links it up with the convention center as well, the Briscoe Museum, and brings several items to the table. And then in the longer run, the Broadway connection, I think, with the Children's Museum moving up there, Kitty Park and Whitty Museum, et cetera, and the connection with the Pearl, makes sense to look at expanding this. And this responds to some of the need that's been articulated out there as well. But it is something that we did not get a chance to review ahead of time, and so I think that's a valid request. Are other questions there? Yes, go ahead.
When you talk about partnerships, does that entail financial partnerships? Would there be a financial contribution from any of the downtown businesses, restaurants, museums? Could you talk about it's going to cost me $150,000 to $200,000? Have there been any projections, understanding very preliminary, about what the fair revenues would be?
Yes, we've provided our interested stakeholders what potential costs could be, and there's been interest expressed by them that they would look at considering paying the fares for their customers.
Okay, because I think that may be, and I agree with Doug, I think this is a tremendous concept, but I think we have to be careful about setting a precedent if we don't have that type of partnership understanding.
Absolutely.
I think the key is, though, also, what's the estimated fair revenues that we will receive from this? You talk about the estimated cost, what's the estimated revenues?
Right. Exactly.
Like the rest of our system, it's going to be in that 16% range or so. So the $1.20 per fare is what they're looking at, for the customer's riding. So it's not going to cover that cost.
So do you have any projections on ridership and you obviously estimated the cost of operations. What's the estimated revenue? You said 16%, so that mean $25,000 to offset the cost? I mean, help me out here, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. We haven't gone back to the stakeholders to see exactly what the amount is, but
I'm not talking about the stakeholders, I'm talking about from people riding the service.
Well, that's why we have the pilot for 3 months to make that evaluation.
So Tracy, you can relate the ridership on, the trouble, of course, with all of these routes is they're very so specific, because I could say, you could relate some downtown circulator ridership to this and say if it generated in a similar fashion, but of course this is serving the Tobin Center, for example, and they don't. And so what does a typical shuttle route in downtown generate in fares?
It's not a whole lot. Offhand, the red route is usually about 800 passengers a day, something like that.
Right.
That's all day long.
Right.
So we're planning to only operate from 6 p.m. to the end of the event. So it's going to be less than that. So you're looking at 400 or less, probably 300 to 400 in that range for your ridership. That's on a daily basis. So at $1, it's $300 or $400.
So $400 a day times 365 days is
well, in this case, 260. We're talking about in the pilot. We're talking about just going from from Tuesday through Saturday.
Days, yeah.
So I got a question. So the initial cost for the trial is what, about $70,000? We're looking at for 3 months. Because you said, what, 200 for a year, so 3 months, you know, roughly a little under $70,000.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so when we get the projections of what potential revenue we would get from using, I think you said a 30-foot bus?
35.
35-foot bus. So how many passengers? I mean, excuse my ignorance, how many does that
The
hold?
pilot, we're not going to have a 35-foot bus because we don't have 35-foot buses on property. So we'll use a 40-foot bus that will retrofit and brand.
Okay.
Okay, so there'll be 2 buses out there at a time. We'll probably carry in the order of, if we carry 100 a night to start off with, 100 to 200. So let's say it's 200.
Okay.
So 200 times 200 is 40,000. Our average fare is in the order of 50 cents, so you're talking 20,000. Okay, per year on an annualized basis. So it's going to be in the order of 15 to 16% of our of the cost. That's pretty much our system average. Okay, so that's the parameters, I think, of what you're looking at here.
Now, that would be
Unless it's a wild success, and, you know, people really care, and we hit 30% of our cost recovery or something like that. But in general, it's going to be 15 to 20%.
So that would just be the fare revenue.
Yes.
So then we have an additional revenue stream coming potentially from the partners. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, we may, unless they decide that they prefer to pay for the fares themselves. So we would just be collecting the fare revenue from the partners as opposed from the customers. So the customers would ride for free.
Excuse me for being a capitalist. Why can't we do both?
Yeah.
Well, if they start paying for the service, then you get into issues related to charters, and that's going to be a much more complicated issue.
Okay.
See, as a public entity that accepts federal money to provide transit services,
I think Mayor Martin's
there are
dying
certain
to
rules
ask
about
a question over here.
Yeah.
there are certain rules about us asking people to pay for service, so that it becomes much more complicated than that.
Having just returned from Houston, where they run a circulator like this with electric buses, and they're free, and many people jumped on and off to get from convention center to hotel room to dining facilities, and it was run efficiently and effectively. And if you have a venue ticket, they could be barcoded. You can then collect directly from whatever the event center is.
Right.
That many people were on it.
That's the service.
That's the way
Well,
that something's done. And you could decorate these as streetcars, and they would be running back and forth, doing exactly where it was going. People would get on and off, and then eventually it's like, oh look, this is a good idea, especially after November.
Right.
This becomes no longer an issue.
Well, those are
Hey,
the...
somebody want to raise a
Yes.
question?
I've
then I'm
got
at
a
the
comment,
text.
and it's far away from what you guys are doing. It's actually, I'm looking at this, and one of my favorite places to go, art-wise, is the Playhouse, and it's sandwiched just kind of in limbo between these 2 routes. And kind of my question is, would it be possible to, if we're talking the arts route and you're going through the Tobin and you're going up Navarro, Maine anyway, what's to stop us from making a little further north stop over at the Playhouse and then coming back down around that way? Because I do think it's an institution here in San Antonio that does play well into that theme, but like I said, it's kind of in this limbo state between these 2 different routes, and I'd like to see it be served.
Okay.
I got one more thing. Before we go on, the silver lining on this thing is you got to understand that this item is event driven. With the completion of the convention center, of course, our ability to book larger venues goes up. So this becomes very quantifiable for someone to use it. Also, we forget the Tobin has many workers. If you ever seen a Tobin event before it kicks off, there's a sea of purple walking down St. Mary Street. Those are the workers for that particular event. So there's actually a silver lining in this. I think this, being a person that works downtown and sees it, I think this is actually has very good potential.
One is, there was a history associated with this that I would encourage you to look into historically with VIA, going back decades. Secondly is I encourage you to talk with the neighborhood associations as well as the museums. There are crises, for instance, in Mankey Park, for instance, that we're looking, that there's a parking garage issue with the Association of Preservation of Single-Member Housing. They should be talked with, and if this was linked in with a parking area or parking garage, it would alleviate some of the conflict that has occurred in the Mankey Park area. So I encourage you to talk with potential partners, also with neighborhood associations, and as partners in all of both the economic and the fiscal components associated with it. So I recommend a sort of park and ride concept be thought of as well. And as Mark said, it's activity driven in this instance, and there's multiple ways you can have financial partnerships, and I encourage you to look at that as well.
Good. I believe, any additional questions? I think we've heard some feedback, for example, from the Paseo del Rio Association supporting it, and I'm assuming you all have been working with the Convention Visitors Bureau and folks like that as well. I know some of those activities on the Houston Street have been involved in this, the restaurants along Houston Street, and so that has helped. Do you have any ideas on other groups that you can visit with? For example, the employees from the Tobin Center that Mark was alluding to.
Well, we'll work with, if you're asking us to expand our reach of who we bring into the discussion, we'll certainly work with our public engagement people to do that. I mean,
But the Tobin Center has been involved,
Tobin
right?
Center, yeah, not the employees themselves, but yeah, the Tobin Center has been involved. Maybe Deani wants to talk about the group of people that we have brought together to talk about this shuttle and who are anxiously awaiting the direction of where this is going.
Speaking of Deani, there she is right behind you.
Good evening. I just wanted to share with you that the stakeholders that have come to the table have been quite extensive. It's not only the Tobin, but the Symphony. There have been independent restaurants that have come, Paseo del Rio, but obviously Centro and others. One of the things that tonight was about was to really get you to look at the route in terms of the pilot. There are people that are willing to come together to look at the funding options. Centro has expressed an interest in bringing a smaller group together to look at funding. During the conversations on the routing, they expressed being able to, if we could brand a pass, then they were willing to look at that. They were willing to promote the pass on their, with their subscription holders, like to the Tobin or the Symphony or whatever. So they would be promoting it on their own websites and doing that kind of promotion. Obviously, the sale of passes and the promotional opportunities are many. They would be willing to buy passes, and if you buy a pass and you're going to ride, then, for example, you would get so much of a discount on your meal. So there are those things on the table. But what I expressed to the group, that until the board approved the pilot, then we couldn't really talk, what would be the sense of talking about those other options and funding opportunities for the future. But the group has been quite engaged. They're calling every day wanting to know where we are. And so hopefully if the board direction is tonight that the pilot can move forward, my response to them has been that we will bring them back together. A funding conversation will occur with major groups that are capable of having that discussion. The parking issue came up about looking for kind of a parking, ride the bus, do that kind of combination. So there's a lot of ideas on the table, but the group that's working on this is quite engaged and are willing to work through those issues once you think that the pilot is something that you would be willing to entertain.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to, I know there's a motion on the table, and I'd like to make a substitute motion that we direct staff to go forward with having further communications and have these terms that are, these expressions of interest and commitment actually be turned
Fermented.
into more material things that the board can really consider, have this all processed through committees, so that we can get as comfortable and informed, frankly, as the stakeholders who have come with these very, clear ideas about what they'd like to see. That we, instead of approving this now, we just direct staff to get that information. Now, it's a long way of maybe saying table, but I'm trying to, I'm trying to just basically sort of articulate that I think we're supportive of the concept, but there seems to be issues that could be nailed down further and allow us, frankly, to catch up with this great idea and sort through maybe the issues we may have on this side of the table. Cost is one of them. The issue of who are we reaching, as Tex mentioned earlier, it's another one. All those other considerations. So I would ask that that's all saying table maybe, but that's all, really what I'm saying is that we not approve this just yet until we get those kinds of things brought forward. And
I think
the Secretary has to type that as a form
I
of a
would say
motion.
that is analogous to real estate when we talk about should we continue moving down the path, but the board ultimately votes after a series of touch points. So this is a touch point.
Yeah.
As long as the board is supportive of at least further exploring the concept
Absolutely.
in a positive sense, because we don't want to go out to the stakeholders
And then
and
create-
get them all built up and they're, yeah, we're
no.
willing to donate dinners or whatever,
Yeah.
and then come back and say, no, we just don't think it's a good idea to do such.
I
a
think
thing.
And
that's
before we
right.
get into discussion of it, we have a substitute motion that's been put on the table. Is
You
there
call
a
it a motion
second?
to table if that's what we want
Is
to call
there
it.
a second?
Second.
Is that, okay, let me get that clarified. Is that a motion to table or a substitute motion?
Whatever you wish it to
Because a
be to get
motion
what
to
I want.
table, you have to have a motion to take it off the table.
No. I will make it the motion that was the long-winded thing that I said.
So a substitute motion to move forward, do additional work on it, bring back some additional ideas and some responses on some of the things we talked about, like potential revenues, the potential to expand, and getting some further additional commitment from other stakeholders as well. And the cost, yes.
Be glad to do that. Thank you.
And in other words, continue working on it and bring it forward. And that's a substitute motion, and we have a second for that?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Becky, you have something?
I have a question. If after it's been substituted, motioned, and it moves on to the next levels, what are you going to be using as your criteria for success during the pilot and during your 3 months? What things are you going to be checking off on your list to say, yeah, this should be forever, or it's almost forever, but we just need to do X, Y, Z things to make it forever?
I think the support and then, at building the ridership throughout the 3-month period. I think we want to get information out. One of the things in talking with some of the stakeholders, they want to make sure it's right, so the information gets out to the customers ahead of time. So we start with the ridership and see if that ridership is growing within this pilot period, then, we want to continue and bolster it.
I had a thought real quick. You can marry this to the suburban 94 to number 6, that they come from suburban to urban and they're going to dinner and they're going right back home, but they're not driving in that distance to go back to suburban. I think this would work even better.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, I guess to summarize, I think that this is an excellent idea. And I think it's something VIA needs to be part of the community involved in stimulating interest in mass transit. That's what we're talking about here. And what that does is it deals with a number of issues, with a number of investments that are occurring downtown, like the convention center expansion, like the Tobin Center, like the other entertainment and cultural activities, the museum reach along Broadway and the river as well. All those are destinations that are valuable and they're appealing. And what this does is it kind of brings a connection for that I think also at the same time introduces people who are not familiar with mass transit to mass transit and makes them understand the value of mass transit at a community table, such as what will happen in Houston, being able to attend the convention and go to your hotel room and value that experience. And so I think it's key that I think the board supports that concept, just needs additional information, and a chance to go to the various, committees. And hopefully you can bring it back to us for a decision. I guess we have an early board meeting in November, so it'll probably be in December that we'll be able to make a final decision on it. Is that okay with you?
We
Okay.
can do that,
We have
Mr.
a motion and a second. If there are no further questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Deani,
This feels a little bit like a ratification.
you're up.
Okay, yeah, Deon, don't go away. You're up from the Transit Advisory Committee
Success, what are we trying to do?
as the next item.
Throw it on the wall.
Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are here this evening to bring back an item that we had some preliminary discussion at the IGRPA committee meeting. I'm going to really turn this over to the person who has done the yeoman's work on this, and that's Stephanie Suarez, who will be lead on this project on behalf of public engagement. She has been working on this committee structure and is bringing back some recommendations for you today. So with that, I'm going to sit by her, and if she needs me, she'll tell me.
Good evening, Chairman Briceño, members of the board, Mr. Arndt. I'm honored to be in front of you this evening requesting your approval for the VIA Transit Advisory Committee Charter. Tonight's presentation will follow the outline of the charter, and so I will highlight the segments of the presentation that accompany the charter. And once we get through tonight's process and hopefully seek your approval, then we will be back with your input on what will be the committee membership. So I will have a slide at the very end that talks about that process, okay? And Chairman Briceño, something you mentioned about working with the community so we stimulate interest in transit, this effort really speaks to that. And so I'm really excited to discuss this more than we did at IGR. In working with the community, I think it's really important to remind the community of who we are and where we're headed. And so this is just a reminder for the folks in the audience and people who will reflect on this agenda item about really what is our purpose. And it's about strengthening regional mobility, development, and sustainability by providing an outstanding multimodal transportation system. And our vision is to be recognized and valued by the community and nation as an essential and effective public multimodal transportation service. Part of an effort that the board did was adopt the 2015 strategic initiatives. And so part of this process as we went back through that document to pull out the goals that really help build the need and the request of the community for this committee. We'd like to be seen as essential to the lives of people, businesses, institutions, and neighborhoods in the region. And again, speaking to the efforts of being the leader, of being the regional thinking and planning body for transportation. Further along with that document, there were even more specific things that you'll see that we put in the charter were to clarify and enhance the purpose, understanding, and image of VIA and the ATD, and we do that by seeking opportunities for collaboration, working with the mindset of VIA being seen as providing multimodal services, and assess and build respect and credibility with our community by being proactive with them and communicating the purpose and role of VIA. So if you spend some time looking at the charter, where we are transitioning right now is the first component of the purpose of the committee. Again, creating an environment for collaboration. We'd like for this group to be a sounding board and offer recommendations on our efforts. We'd like for them to serve as transit ambassadors to strengthen lines of communication with their constituencies and stakeholders and provide feedback or issues of concern. As you know, the city is undertaking a very large effort in regards to comprehensive planning, and so we would want to make sure that we would be in alignment with those efforts, utilizing this committee and hearing their thoughts and ideas. We would also, as we gear up for updating our long-range transportation comprehensive plan, we could also use them as a community resource and then identify opportunities to partner and leverage resources. And going to the second component of the charter, this is where we talk about the membership. And so we would be looking to organizations and community representatives throughout our service area with an emphasis on diversity and geographic representation. The board would appoint a chair and a vice chair for the committee, and our participants would be, if they are representing an organization, those of a decision-making ability. These are the categories, as noted in the charter, that we would look for representation. At the IGR and PA committee meeting, we went a little further to give some ideas of how we could populate these categories. And tonight, since we're only focusing on the charter, we're just focusing on these at-large participant categories. I don't know if you want me to read through them, or we've seen this before, okay. And so the newer thing, what came up at the IGR and PA meeting, was how would we facilitate this group? And so the initial list we talked about was, you know, you could get to about 60 to 70 individuals, and so it's how do you facilitate a substantive dialogue? And so an idea, as the charter states, is that we would have no less than 2 meetings. There could be some special meetings and then maybe some subcommittee efforts. So the outline that I had given showed that in January we would have a retreat. And so in the center you see a kickoff meeting. And the ideal scenario would be is that we have a retreat, a forum, where we work with these stakeholders to identify 4 key topics related to transit that would then provide a quarterly focused conversation. So for example, somebody could maybe talk about Southwest Corridor. It's a big project that's coming forward. What are all those components? Are there opportunities for joint development? What are we doing in route planning as it relates to that project? So there could be members of the committee that want to champion that effort. And they would partner with staff, and then we would determine, for that quarterly focused discussion, do we want to have a seminar? Do we want to have a workshop? How do we educate our larger committee on this topic? So this is just an example of how we could work with our committee. They drive some of the topics, and we champion and have quarterly conversations that then we could have a product that we could recommend later to this board. This timeline just shows the transition to a broader concept. The purpose of October was to get board input gathering. If we receive your approval today, then November would serve as the appointment process. And I have a slide that goes a little more into what we would like to achieve in November. So if we were to receive approval today, you would receive a communication tomorrow with the assistance of Mr. Arndt's office and seeking nominations from you all. And we would have the attached recommendations that we had given at the IGR and Public Affairs Committee. And we would then would like to ask that our chair and our IGR and PA chair work on helping us come up with a recommendation to the board. And we would present the proposed VTAC membership at the IGR committee to get some feedback. Again, allow for more input, where at the November board meeting, we would then propose perhaps the final recommendation for membership. A lot to happen in 3 weeks, but we've been getting some ideas of what the committee structure ideally could look like. And so I'm hopeful, and if we need to extend that a little bit, we understand that to make sure that we have everybody's input. Okay. And again, the idea is just to get something at least to the committee meeting, and again, you know, so, and these are all just recommendations just to have a framework to work from. And so in December, if we kept to some timeline, the idea was to have an informal gathering with our committee, get to know each other, perhaps at Westside Multimodal. We could show them what that facility is about and what we hope to achieve. We could have some display boards, and then in January, we would have a kickoff for goal setting and planning. So with that, we are seeking your approval just for the charter tonight. I want to recognize Dr. Mendoza gave me a lot of credit, but there are a lot of people that have been contributing to this idea because it will be an absolute cross-departmental team effort to make this a rewarding experience for everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. And so with the action we're being asked to do today is approve the charter and then move forward with the other items that you listed, like providing some nominations, hopefully on November 5th or 6th maybe, in case some people have to recover on the 5th. But provide potential movement forward so it can get nominations submitted to the IGR committee. I believe it's scheduled for November 10th.
Yes.
November 10th is that scheduled meeting, and move forward with the implementation of this thought. So is there a motion and a second on approving the charter? So moved. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? I would just make one suggestion. The terminology, the term committee is kind of boring.
Okay.
And we have a lot of them, you know, and so when we talk about this committee, that committee, you know, we have the IGR, Public Affairs Committee, we have the Operational Oversight and Finance Committee. Maybe we should call it an advisory council. Is that
You can use the same initials, that's more.
same? Yeah.
Okay.
That gives you the same acronym, but it also might be appealing for members that are going to be potential appointees to be part of the Transit Advisory Council, the TAC, as opposed to the Transit Advisory Committee. And so I'd like to offer that as a suggestion. Okay. Is that amenable with the maker and the seconder of the motion?
Fine, second.
Okay, so with their agreement, they've added that to make that change. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. I think there's an important initiative, and we need to move forward. And again, as part of that entire effort of working with the community and getting folks familiar with the value of mass transit. And this is going to be moving forward in that direction. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a real estate item. I believe that's a closed session. And we also have a legal briefing, some closed session items after that. Do we have to vote on the real estate item? Take action on that?
Yes, yes.
And so are we going to move into closed session and handle all the closed session items? And then come back out and vote on that one real estate item? Okay. So with that, we're going to, the time is now 7:01 p.m. and the Via Metropolitan Transit Board of Trustees will officially go into a closed executive session. The items we will discuss during this executive session are as follows. Item number 11 entitled Real Estate, 11A Polanco Road, which is an executive session item pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, entitled Consultation with Attorney, and Section 551.072, entitled Real Estate Property. Initiatives, parking initiatives, item 12C, parking initiatives, the Tobin Garage Parking Agreement, which are executive session items pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, entitled Consultation with Attorney. All persons are authorized to attend the executive session. Please proceed to the small conference room. It is now 8:04 p.m., and we are officially coming out of closed executive session regarding agenda items 11A and 12C. No deliberation of public policy or vote taking occurred during the executive session. With that, we have one item left on the agenda to be presented and taken action on, and that is item 11. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian Buchanan.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. This evening, staff is asking for the declaration of a piece of property, 59 acres, approximately 60 acres, at 7,000 Potranco Road to be declared excess property and to be put on the market for sale. Staff, via purchases back in 1994 for a possible paratransit facility and an ancillary facility to our facility here at this location. Staff and management has determined that it is no longer needed and it would be in the best interest of VIA to go ahead and put it on the market for sale and allow available bidders to bid on the property or come to us with proposals for the use of the property. So with that, this evening, we are asking for a resolution to put the piece of property on the market.
Okay, do we have a motion on this item?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? I just have one question, Brian. What's your estimated time frame on this in terms of the advertising period and all that?
We'd like to get it advertised this year. With this motion tonight, we can advertise it. I would anticipate it would take several months to go through the whole entire process.
Put it on the market for 2 or 3 months or something?
Yeah, at least 2 or 3 months to see what we get back. And I might remind the board that everything we do get back comes back to the board for approval.
Okay, very good. We have a motion and a second. Are there any additional questions?
How will you put it on the market?
It is actually advertised in the local advertising newspapers, and we'll probably put a sign on the property also and allow other people in the industry know that it is for sale. We do not actually advertise the sale price of the property. We allow them to come to us with their offers for the property.
Right, but you'll be handling this internally?
We do. John Seymour is our real estate agent. We do sometimes work with brokers, but it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Any additional questions? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
That's our last time, right, Jess? Yes, sir. Okay, with that, we will adjourn the meeting.